Steve, thank you so much for coming because, we're building something we're super excited about. And one thing that we're doing more than anything is we're trying to help people that would love to be Steve or to be Evan or Richard or our top leaders to find out the pathway to get there. And they only see the finished product of Steve up on stage and we're all cheering and I notice your story is beautiful and very vulnerable, and you share, hey, here's where I was at as a chiropractor, and this is where it brought me, and I was experiencing these things and I made these life changes, much like Richard made changes and I made changes at a certain point. And a few things that we're trying to do is in HowLeader, Steve, we want to teach people about a pathway to get to, if they aspire to you to be Steve. I'm sure you meet them at your seminars and they say, Steve, I want to do what you do. And you can talk with them for a minute, but not everybody could take you out to lunch or can see you. And we want to also show them what you would give as gifts to them and recommend, but also challenges you've gone through and what you did in those challenges. So I really have a set of questions that we bring people through, but we try to get intimacy with you, intimacy, really, where people can see into you.
Ooh, intimacy, I like that.
Yes.
I never heard that before. Good.
Yes. And we feel that this is a different kind of teaching, right? It's where you'll give some insight, some advice, but otherwise people have to start from scratch. Tell me a little bit about, if you would, your successes. I mean, there's a lot of successes in coaching and giving talks. And what do you feel you're best at? What are you most proud of?
That's a great question. I often ask myself the question of what do I like the most? What am I best at? What am I most proud of? It seems that that changes with the seasons, because there are times when I'm more inclined toward the one-on-one, the healing aspect of what I do. I feel like at the very foundation of who I am and what I do is I'm a healer.
Yes.
I was literally a healer in my days as a chiropractor, but even leaving that, even getting beyond it, and even becoming an entertainer, I never lost that sense that when you're entertaining people, you're still healing them. You're still helping to change and shift their state of consciousness. And as that shift takes place, it opens up choice. It opens up a sense of another way of looking at this thing that I'm in. And how often have any one of us been up against the wall and feeling overwhelmed or just, in a state of grief or some kind of pain. And then, we hear a joke or we see a great comedian or something, and nothing in our life has changed, right? It's all the same set of circumstances, but because our state has changed, the entire profile of the experience has changed. So for me, I guess it's the fact that over the years, I've cultivated the ability to heal in many ways. And that's, healing the heart and healing the body and healing the mind through laughter and astonishment, and also through wisdom, the kinds of training that I do with people that somewhat puts their feet to the fire, to the flames, and says, look, there are things you need to do.
Yes.
If you want to excel, if you want to get beyond, because so many of us, as you said, we look at the end product. This is the result I want. This is who I want to be. And then we try to model the people who are very successful without realizing all the layers beneath. Like the duck looks so graceful going across the water, but you don't see the paddle, the feet paddling furiously as they move.
Yes.
So, love it. That's a great analogy.
Just seeing the inner workings of what success looks like. And from my perspective, all of this stuff ultimately comes down to the art of living.
Yes. Okay, great. Fantastic. And it sounds like you've made a plan around what the art of living is, and you have ways to bring people through the different parts, but part of that is getting to their own heart, but you also make some requests around commitment and participation and driving themselves, right? And taking risks. Like, hey, if you want to be here, if you want to do this, then you need to dig deep in these ways. Could you tell us a little bit about that, like the plan, sort of?
Unfortunately, we've all grown up in a culture where where most forms of therapy or most forms of healing, and I use the word healing loosely because it often isn't healing at all, are passive. Somebody's going to do something to me, somebody's going to give me something to take, somebody's going to change my environment so that I can be happy, healthy, strong, and successful, and none of those things ever work. So, yes. And people run from one to the next, and eventually they either give up exhausted and decide there's no point in this and I'll never get successful, or they stumble across wisdom. And wisdom requires a set of steps. It requires that we work on ourselves from the inside out. And there's no substitute for it. There's nothing you can do. There's no shortcut. The short way is the long way is the short way, and that's just the reality of it. So I ask people, if I work with them, first of all, to hear me, spout out my diatribe of how the mind works, and sit back and listen to this and see if it makes sense to you. And if it makes sense to you, then now we're going to start getting into some exercises. There are things you're going to have to do, and if you don't do them, you're not going to get the results. I mean, you could have a cathartic moment with me because I'm pretty good at, poking the right spots, but that cathartic moment is going to be short-lived unless you do the work. Unless you get to that inner rewiring process. It's, they call neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to rewire itself, so that our predominant thoughts, or default mode, is positive versus negative, is resourceful versus victim.
Yes.
And it takes work. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is incredible. And Richard had shared with me about neuroplasticity and all the, the important pieces, how we're redesigning things. And I was going to ask too, someone who's listening, from a starting standpoint, they have to listen and buy into the philosophy you have. If you're speaking to people out there about, I'm going to get to, I have some official questions, but you have me so inspired, I want to go down.
I've never been able to get through any of the official questions with anybody because we always end up in a great conversation.
Yes.
But go for it. Let's try it.
If we can, yes, just because in my heart and in what you're sharing, there's that part of me that wants to go deep with you too and meet you there. I think that's of such value for people. And so, but from a simplicity standpoint, after you share things with them and you start exercises with them, what's the start of the inner journey? What's the first steps of it for them?
Well, the first step is the commitment. And the distinction is, I never ask anybody for blind faith. I'm not saying believe this or believe that, but I'm saying that there are things that you're going to have to open your mind to in order to try them to find out whether or not they produce results for you. So it's that stance, that kind of cautious optimism or a willingness to be open-minded that we need. And then the commitment that I'm going to take the steps and do the disciplines, because any journey toward enlightenment or anywhere on the way to enlightenment, anything that's trying to get us closer to, that reunion that you used the term earlier before we started, coming home, coming
yes.
home. Even when you look at religion and you break down the word religion in its highest form, it's religios, it's, reunion with God, reconnecting with our higher selves. And whether you're looking at it from a metaphysical or a religious standpoint, the ultimate thing is we want to come back to ourselves.
Yes.
We're born and we're kicked out of the womb, and it's all downhill from there. It's all we suffer from not having that sense of constant connection, love, acceptance, and life has a way of dealing us blows and throwing monkey wrenches in the works. And because we don't feel that sense of connection, we're always just a little bit off our game.
Yes.
So I say, if we're working with people who are aspiring leaders and aspiring entrepreneurs, which I do a lot of, that this isn't just a game of how to be better at the job.
Yes.
It's how do I become a better human being? How do I bring out my best self? And most people don't know what that means.
Yes.
Now, most people don't know what resilience means. You say resilience, and what they think is I've just got to grit my teeth tighter. It's like, now I'm resilient. No, it's not how it works at all. That's not the thing. That's why people who are truly successful, they smile, they breathe, they lead with grace, and they tend to inspire others to follow them. So if that's not the kind of leader you are, there's literally nothing you can do about it until you work on yourself.
Yes. Oh my God. Unbelievable. So perfect. I absolutely, I am so in alignment with that. And you're putting it in a way that I couldn't say it nearly that well. It's just right. It describes, because people are seeking, they do want more. Sometimes they don't know what they want, and they don't realize the reward of connection and how important it is. And doing the work and committing to do the work, I found that to be such an important thing. And I've done enough of it that I can be in a pretty amazing space a lot of the time now, and I'm grateful for that. But I put the time in, right, and I kept going deeper. And how do you either elicit commitment from people around doing the work, or maybe get them to see what will happen if they don't do the work, and keep them going through it, because they really have to bring the drive to a variety of places? And any suggestions to people about, if you're not committed, how to be committed or decide to be committed?
Well, two things. One, it's like the carrot and the stick. What am I running from? What am I running towards? One of the things is getting really present to the fact that I'm running from a miserable life. I'm not happy. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do. I might even be financially successful, but my life isn't rewarding. I'm filled with stress and misery. I'm, fighting with my spouse. I'm at odds with my clients and with my staff, and that's something that, if you become present to it, starts to, at least to the somewhat wise human being, starts to push a few buttons and say, okay, well, maybe there is another way. And all that stuff that I was sort of led to do by society isn't necessarily the whole picture. So that's the first one, is the carrot or the stick. You got to get away from that unworkable life. And then the carrot is that there are flowers along the path, that if you make that provisional commitment, if you decide, I'm going to start meditating, for example.
Yes.
Right, that, you're going to have, it's going to be tough. There are going to be tough times, but you're also going to notice these momentary shifts in the way you experience things, or the way you respond to things, that you never could have done by thinking your way out of where you are.
Yes.
I've got to be more, I've got to be tougher. I've got to be more patient. I've got to be less angry. You could say that to yourself from Natal Doomsday, but if you don't do the work to change it, all you're doing is saying what you've got to be without actually doing what it takes to change it. Now, when you do start changing it, say you're meditating a couple times a day and you've got this built into your system, among other things, we'll talk about some of those things, then maybe the moments during which you're meditating may not be particularly pleasant, because what meditation is looking at what is.
Yes.
And if you haven't looked at what is for a long time, what is has been lacking a whole lot of attention. So it's like turning on a light in a dirty room. It's not a pleasant experience. You're suddenly looking at all the angst and discomfort inside of yourself that you've been spending your entire life avoiding. And it keeps chasing you. So all of a sudden you say, stop and get quiet and look at yourself and experience what's going on right now. And that something may be very unpleasant, and you might be thinking the entire 20, 30, 40 minutes that this is a waste of time and I'm never going to get anywhere, and why would I ever subject myself to this kind of torture?
Yes, yes.
And then the next day, or maybe later the same day, you're outside and somebody bumps into you or something, and you find yourself being graceful and patient, or maybe having a sense of humor about it, where before you might have been, reactive.
Yes.
And so these things start to show up, these little gifts, these moments of gratitude, these moments of humor, these moments of perspective, or these moments of wisdom or better resourcefulness. I've noticed for myself that when I'm doing this kind of work, and science bears us out on this, that I get smarter.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I just have more, there's just more going on upstairs. And I have an attitude about this. When we start talking about the art of living,
yes, yes,
especially as it relates to individuals in some kind of leadership role, or somebody who's trying to build a business or build a life, part of it's their skills. If I'm working next week, I'll be speaking to a group of project managers. Well, one aspect of being good at it is you have to know what a project manager is and what they do and know how to do it. So that's a skill. Then there are the habits. What are you doing on a day-by-day basis that furthers your cause? Then there are your attitudes, right? Are you operating with integrity and responsibility? Are you reactive to others? All that, those are attitudes. But then there's our emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Am I able to regulate my emotions such that I walk into a situation that requires a smart, agile mind? And I've got a smart, agile mind in that moment, rather than having a stressed out, depressed mind. And people just don't realize the value of making that distinction. And here's something that we've all experienced. You ever have to pee?
Yeah.
And you kind of put it out of your mind because you're too busy, and you get to working and you find you forget that you had to pee. But you find that you're a little edgy, a little impatient, a little irritable. It's just like you don't have the same wherewithal. And you're less resourceful, you're trying to make snap decisions, you're taking shortcuts, you're irritating people around you. And then all of a sudden it dawns on you, oh, I guess I have to pee.
Yes.
And you pee, and all of a sudden it's like you're suddenly in a different state of mind. You're no longer agitated, you're no longer edgy. I feel like we're all walking around having to pee.
Oh my God, yes. And
right?
that's so true. And that aligns, Richard and I believe, we pushed for our success. And I remember when I had 5 cars and I was in a 10,000 square foot home, and that was great. And I had reached my pinnacle at the sea level. But I had done a lot of work on myself before that. So I was happy, but I also knew that that the happiness was coming from all my practices. And I had a lot of people that had all the things and they weren't happy. And there's been 2 levels of real success for you, maybe 3. One being a great chiropractor, another deciding that you were going to pursue this and build the business. And then I think 3rd is the evolution, that the transformation in you that happened. Could you tell us a little bit about how did you become so successful and what drove you? Because it seems like you have the financial success, professional recognition, and, obviously a doctorate. And then what kind of transformed for that? Did you hit a point where it wasn't enough and you said, there's got to be more?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I encourage people to do is, as Richard and I talked about earlier, the idea of living an intentional life.
Yes.
Is to stop, look, and listen. Like, what's going on inside of me? And am I really doing the thing is this right livelihood for me? Is this the thing that's going to bring out the best of who I am and produce the best results in the world? And I was a successful chiropractor, and I was, making a good living, and I was helping a lot of people, and nobody could fault that. But at the same time, there was something inside of me that I was antsy. I knew at some level, without knowing, consciously, that I was meant for something else.
Yes.
And I have nothing against the profession of chiropractic. I still see chiropractors. I still adjust friends and family. It's still a part of my DNA. But the leaving part of it was a leap into the void.
Yes.
Because I didn't have my next life all mapped out when I made the leap. And I'd actually been counseled by a very wise person, Jerry Stocking, a guy who wrote a book called How to Win by Quitting.
Yes.
And Jerry said, never plan your next life before you leave the one before.
Yes. Oh my God.
Right? Isn't that interesting? So it was really like you've got to experience the void. You've got to let yourself go into the uncertainty. You've got to feel all the things that are there to feel, because otherwise our habituation to comfort and certainty are so strong that as soon as we leave one thing and the void opens up, we just snap up the next thing that looks as much like it as we can, which is why people have serial relationships that all look the same.
Yes.
How come everybody I ever went out with looks like my mother after a month or 2?
Yes.
So what's that all about?
Yes.
So these are just, patterns. And if you don't take the time to break the patterns, you're just going to recreate them.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So for me, you asked about how my process worked. A lot of it was a coexisting process. There was the external, which was go from being a chiropractor to being a magician, to being a hypnotist, to being a speaker and an author, and then kind of coming full circle and doing some more healing work now in a more psychological realm. All of those things were informed by my gradually budding mindfulness practice, right? So when I left my chiropractic practice, I wasn't super mindful, but I knew there was more, and that, I started experiencing that there was a way of getting outside of my own emotions and looking at them versus acting from them.
Yes.
I'd already learned that a little bit, and I didn't have any tools to do it on a consistent basis except the ones I'd made up at the time. But it was enough to get me out the door. It was enough to give me the courage to say, I don't know what's next, but this is not what my life is supposed to look like. And so I left. And then in my days as a stage hypnotist, I had a pivotal moment, and I was already doing mindfulness meditation training and things, and so I was doing the introspective work, and I was also doing these big shows, and I was the official hypnotist for MTV Spring Break.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yes.
I was in Jamaica doing a show on the beach of Negril Beach. There were like 2,500 semi-inebriated college students out on the beach. And I use the word semi very loosely.
Yes.
And then I had about 25 hypnotized subjects on stage, and I was doing all the things that I would do in an ordinary show. I've got them milking a cow or conducting an orchestra. Got one guy thinks he's pregnant.
That's great.
Another guy thinks he's the father. And in the middle of this, I decided to try something new. So I took one of my subjects and I said, when you wake up in a moment, 3 things are going to happen. I said, number 1, you don't believe you're hypnotized even though you are.
Yes.
So number 2, this is the worst show you've ever seen and you're aggravated with me. And I said, number 3, there's an invisible wall 3 feet in front of you.
Yes.
So I woke everybody up. I said, how's everybody doing? And this one guy screams, you suck.
That's great.
And luckily it was him. And I said, what's the problem? He says, the show is terrible. I said, well, leave. And the guy gets up, he takes 3 steps and hits the wall. And he can't get through it. And he finally sits back down, he crosses his arms, and he starts to pout. And I said, what's the problem? And he says, nothing. I said, are you hypnotized? He goes, no. I said, are you having fun? He goes, no. I said, well, then why don't you leave? And he thinks for a minute, and he goes, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction.
Yes.
And it was this pivotal moment for me, because aside from the fact that it was very funny, I realized something profound in that moment, which is he had a place he wanted to go, which was away off the stage. Yes. And he tried moving toward it, but he hit an invisible wall that didn't exist anywhere except in his own mind. And he was hypnotized, but didn't realize it.
Yes.
And then I thought, well, how does that differ from any of us?
Yes. Oh my God.
And that was the aha for me. That's when I wrote my first book on hypnosis, because I recognized this parallel between somebody in a hypnotized state and everybody else who lives somewhat hypnotized. We're kind of half awake, we're on automatic a lot of the time, we're kind of sleepwalking through life, and we're programmed to believe certain things that are probably far from true. So if I can wake that individual up, suddenly the wall is no longer there and he becomes empowered. And that's exactly the same as what, all of the spiritual work is about. Let me wake you up to realize the illusory nature of all the things that you think are stopping you.
Yes. Oh my God. What an analogy to transfer that to that and to see that and have that clarity in that moment.
It was a moment, it was one of those pivotal life moments, because a lot of things have grown out of it. And it is as clear a metaphor as you can really come up with, because how many of us are, and this was true of him as well, are pushing against our own resistance and blaming somebody else or blaming something else.
Yes.
Right. And that's what he was doing. And that's what we all do. It's like, well, I would do better if the economy was better, or if I had a more understanding boss, if my spouse wasn't such a pain.
Yes.
There's all these excuses for it. And when it comes right down to it, the third Zen patriarch said, the great way isn't difficult for those with no preferences. It's like when you're not addicted to having this or that, but instead you're just clear and you're operating with integrity and responsibility and accountability.
Oh, yes. Oh, God.
And those are foundational. So, that brings us back to that part of the conversation, which is, what do you do with somebody who's never been exposed to this? And you say, well, look, your life's not working, and here's a path where you'll start to see little moments during which your life will be working. But if you want to really walk that path, the first thing you're going to have to do is clean up your act.
Yes.
You can't be, lying, stealing, cheating, killing, raping, and, whatnot. That's not going to ever get you the life you want. Shortcuts don't work. And operating on reaction doesn't work.
Oh my God, so true. And I love this. This aligns so much, because I was thinking, as I listened to what I realized, in being called to use this for people and into healing, and even the depth that you're giving and doing now, there's a part of you that you really, there's, I believe, reward in impacting people and transforming and changing them. And have you felt a greater inner reward, not just from getting the consciousness within you through your own work, but through the aspect of service? Tell us a little about that, if you would.
Yeah, this is getting to the intimate part of the conversation, right? Because what does it feel inside of me? And, the first thing I'll tell anybody readily and willingly is that I'm not a cooked goose. I'm not completely enlightened, and I've got my dark moments, and sometimes they're more than moments. And I'm aware of that. And I'm aware that I carry some of the old baggage with me, and it's not gone. It's just that I've changed my relationship with it.
Yes.
So I know how to move through it more elegantly, so it doesn't hold me back. And one of the things that has the capacity to help me break through some of my darkness is those moments when I realize I've made an impact for somebody else.
Yes.
I've said something that a light bulb went off. They're like, oh yeah, that's it. And all the stuff that they've been doing that hasn't been working, and all that sense of disempowerment and hopelessness gets a respite, because there's a new way of looking at this. There's a new part of you that you could bring to bear to get the results you want. There's a new sheriff in town, and if I can help people find that, then that's a huge part of what gives me that keeps me going.
Wow, that is amazing. So wonderful. And I think when we've cleaned ourselves out, and then we make decisions about what we're putting within us through the meditation and prayer, and the old things can come up sometimes, but they're more like a whisper at times. And the biggest thing is we don't act on them. But I was going to say, as you're doing this, has anybody had a huge effect on you from a mentor standpoint, or who's had the biggest impact in giving to you?
Mostly, very spiritual people who have walked their walk, and people who have, been challenged in a big way and have maintained a pretty positive attitude throughout. So some of those people are people that are no longer living, but have had an impact through their writing, like Napoleon Hill.
Yes.
Somebody like that. Ram Dass, who is a spiritual teacher in the kind of guru lineage, like a Hindu guru lineage. He's not a guru himself, but he was taught by a guru, came back to the U.S. He went to India back in the early 70s as Richard Alpert, the psychology professor at Harvard, and was given the name Ram Dass, and came back and taught meditation. He wrote the book Be Here Now.
Yes.
And he was one of the original pioneers of helping people in our culture understand that there's more than just the surface psychology that we learn about in our lives. So, and he happened to be somebody who was, very plugged in on both in the spiritual world, but also in the very pragmatic aspect of being a successful person in America. His father was a highly successful railroad executive. He was a Harvard professor. He had a great sense of humor, and so he was somebody who influenced me. Recently, well, a little bit later was, the book The Power of Now.
Yes, sure.
Eckhart Tolle.
Absolutely.
That had a big impact on me. I felt like it was a really clear telling of what it is to quiet down and to be present, and to not, and to use what you've got to bring you back into the moment. Use your own body, your own emotions to bring you back into the moment. And so it was a practical thing, and I found that very helpful. And I did a long meditation workshop, a 10-day silent meditation retreat, 17 years ago, and then I repeated it last week. I just got back last week from 10 days
God,
silent meditation. And it's a fascinating story, the whole evolution of that particular Vipassana meditation movement, which is worldwide. And there are these wonderful centers where you can go and take a 10-day course in how to meditate and really understand why you're meditating and what you're getting out of it, and what to look for if you're off. And and the community are just anybody, regular people of every religion, every philosophy. It's just a very pragmatic, non-dogmatic way of learning, and it's been spread through the world by S.N. Goenka, who was a Burmese businessman back in the 60s or 50s, developed terrible headaches. He was very successful, and he traveled the world trying to take care of the headaches, was unable to do it, and ended up learning meditation from somebody who was part of this lineage of teachers going all the way back to the Buddha.
Wow, absolutely amazing. And I'm familiar with Ram Dass, and I love that you do the 10-day meditations. Absolutely incredible. And I was going to ask too, and I want to preface this by saying, Steve, I went through a time in my life where I hit anxiety, depression, fear. It just kind of came through me, and I wasn't sure where it was coming from. And I think it was a variety of factors, but it was almost overwhelming. And I was like, why did this arrive? And, and I did a lot of work to break through and overcome that through a variety of ways and things over the years, probably very similar to the stuff that's near and dear to you. You mentioned, as I studied up, though, there was a moment where you kind of hit your lowest point or a dark point. And, some people that want to be successful, and we'll get into more later about how to become Steve, or if you have a dream, how to chase it, and, what you'll come up against and how to see it through. But I was going to say, what would you tell people in the moment if they do hit a dark spot? They're very successful, or maybe they're not successful, but they hit that moment of this just isn't feeling good, going well. How did you have the grit to walk out of that? Like, what things did you tell yourself? And were there moments too of surrender where I don't know if I'm going to walk out of this? Did you have to really accept and stand in that?
That's a great question. The question is telling about yourself as well, because you clearly walk the walk and been in it and out of it, and that's that makes us more powerful translators of the path when we've actually been in it and out of it and in it and out of it, because it gives you more hope. You have the hope, you could pass it on a little bit. Yeah, it's not just one moment in my life. There have been a few of those really strong moments of confusion and loss. I mean, in my practice, it was when I realized that it was getting more and more difficult for me to get up every morning and do what I did for no reason other than it didn't feel like the right thing to do anymore. But it was so painful. I'd go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 9 o'clock, I would have already looked at my watch 10 times.
Yes.
The day was going slow. And that was just an indication to me. And it was in that moment, one of the things that I tell anybody is there are promptings from time to time.
Yes.
Follow them, right? Don't feel like you need to know what the next step is. So my prompting was, I was in a chiropractic seminar, sitting in the back of the room, and there was a motivational speaker on stage who was just he was killing it. He was just, everybody was up and they're pumping their fists, and they were feeling very good about their profession. And I felt nothing, and I wanted to feel it. It wasn't that I disliked the profession. I had nothing. And it was like, there was this horrible feeling inside. And I was in the back of the room, and I had a magazine, a chiropractic magazine. And I turned to the back of the magazine where they had the classified ads, and I found an ad for a company that evaluates practices for sale. That will come in and tell you how much it's worth to sell it. And I got up right then in the middle of this motivational speech and went to a payphone and called to get my practice assessed.
That's great.
It was like just like that. And I knew it was like, because I tried, take a seminar, get a little excited, learn a new technique. And I'd done my due diligence, but at that point it was clear. And so one of the things is follow a prompting when they come, go for it. And it doesn't mean you have to know what the next step is. You just have to know what this step is.
Yes. Oh my God. So beautiful and powerful. And what a clarifying moment. And I was thinking too, one of the beliefs Richard and I do have is that if we can get happiness and inner peace and strength within us, either during or whatever our journey is, whether it's corporate or our own business or being a healer, or prior, as we're at the outset, right? Even some of the young people, if you get inner peace and happiness, it will fuel your journey to be who you are, but also do better, because there's times I made that last phone call or did that last piece in business and I'm like, oh my God, this is call number 14 and 14th interview. And I love interviewing, but a lot of these were really to attract and make money for the companies that I've helped become very rich, and getting close to people is the key thing in this. So, okay, great. And I was going to say too, in transitioning from that, because I was going to say, with people that would want to go down your path and motivate others and be a healer or start a business, many people get the inspiration like you spoke about, but they don't walk towards it. They don't act on it. Fear comes in. What would you tell people about how to become you? And they'll be their own Steve, right? And they'll have their own gifts to do, but what advice would you give them? Like, how would you guide them about musts or things that are part of the process? And this could be part of a future class for you, is about look for this sign, act on this, but a little bit.
I just got a flood of answers to that question from slightly different, perspectives.
Good.
Let me see where this goes. I'll start talking and see what comes out of my mouth. Yeah. One piece of it is, to the extent that you're able to bring wisdom into your process, meaning that I can start relying on myself to make good decisions and to respond appropriately when obstacles arise. I can anticipate obstacles before they arise.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're teaching somebody to play football and you want them to get a touchdown, you don't just teach them how to run from one end of the field to the other, because that's not how the game is played. You got to run from one end to the other, but you've got to also dodge and weave and see people coming at you. And that's true of any goal, right? You've got this place you want to go, but you've got to just assume that that you're going to meet obstacles along the way, many of which are in your own head.
Yes. Yeah.
But they are obstacles nonetheless. And so if you go into this exciting goal that you set for yourself with nothing, armed with nothing but enthusiasm, you're gonna take a beating, because yes, enthusiasm is great, but it's short-lived. So you need the enthusiasm, but you also need the clarity to anticipate that I'm going to get slammed by my insecurity, I'm going to get slammed by my laziness, or I'm going to get slammed by, whatever it happens to be. I know that I have a tendency to do X, Y, and Z. And so because I know it, I've been down that road in other ways. Yeah. I know that as soon as I hit that point, then what I've got to do is I've got to stop, I've got to do this, maybe I've got to meditate, maybe I've got to call a friend. But I've got to have those contingency plans laid out before I start, right? So that's one of my answers, is if you want to be a successful speaker or an author or a thought leader or a healer, know going into it that it's going to demand growth of you. It's going to demand wisdom of you. And if you think, oh, I'm really excited about this idea, none of those things are going to happen to me, good luck. It's not going to work that way. It's going to be a rude awakening. So I think that kind of wisdom, and so have a practice, have something that you're doing that keeps strengthening your ability to access resourcefulness, creativity, resilience. Those things have to be in place before you start.
Yes.
And then I think the other thing that kind of popped into my head, and I think I could see how these two concepts align with each other, is one of the nuances, and this may be, again, too esoteric at this point in the process for somebody who's not even at the beginning of the path yet, but one of the things you'll encounter is how you, part of your brain will sabotage another part of your brain.
Yes.
Part of your brain will use the very thing you're trying to accomplish as a way of keeping you from accomplishing it. So let me explain that, because that sounded really weird. As an author, as a thought leader, as a philosopher, that's kind of who I am. I know that I know how my brain works, right? Like I'll think of like this analogy I used before about having to pee.
Yes.
That's an analogy that I thought of it years ago, and it just popped in again today when I was preparing for this call. Right? Now I don't do a lot of preparing. I mean, that's all I wrote down for like, a couple of quick notes for myself, but otherwise we're just rolling. But this concept, this like the feeling that you get when you have to pee, that makes you have to, you get antsy and you don't realize you're antsy and it's affecting everything else until you pee. That analogy came to me while I was meditating.
Oh, wow.
Now, while you're meditating, that's when you're supposed to be quiet and developing this sort of like this capacity to watch yourself, but your brain loves that moment to like chatter in your ear, right? So let's say you want to be a healer. And the truth is that if you want to be a healer, if you want to be a thought leader, you've got to have a sizable period of your time during the day in self-reflection, in quiet introspection, in healing yourself.
Yes.
And while you're sitting there quietly introspecting and healing yourself, your brain is spitting off all these great ideas. It's often a trap because it's like, oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. You're chasing ideas and you're like writing books in your head and you're writing speeches in your head. And what you're not doing is the work you need to do to be the person who's got the gravitas to be able to share that stuff.
Yes. Yes. So true. And so, my God, there's so much you're hitting on that I feel so connected, Steve, on so many things. And I want to say, too, one would say, hey, we can't coach someone in an area that we're not proficient in. That's more the intellectual kind of assignment of that. But I think the real assignment is that if we're not in the being space of what it is, and we haven't done that work and we're not sitting there, we can't bring people there or attract them. And we may have ideas and brainstorms, but we have to be that foundation. It's like anything else without that foundation. And there, in what you were sharing too, I was realizing that there's so many things that came to my mind and heart in your examples, by the way. I find myself getting so inspired as we're doing this. I was going to say too, at the outset of making the commitment to do something, people do have to take sort of an inventory of themselves, right? To know what their defects or what their interferences will be that will get in the way and not be put down by them. They have to expect tests, right? And find a way to renew themselves, to have the fortitude to push beyond those. But they have to also know what obstacles are going to get in their way and either use their mind to get them out of the way or perhaps do a little bit of healing. And in your work, is there a cleaning out process before people begin the assignment? Okay, I thought so. Yeah,
I love hearing you say this. In my first, actually, I think this is in all my books somewhere, but I know in Hypnosis, the first step in, along the way, or I think it might be at the end of the introduction, where it says the first thing you need to do is to take a mental inventory.
Yes.
And it's very much what you said, because consciousness has to precede the path. You're going to become more conscious as time goes on, but when you meet people who say, oh, I don't want to look at the negative, it's just pessimistic. Now, that's not what it is. It's realistic. You've got to be aware of who you really are. You've got to face that stuff. And sometimes just the very illuminating of it is enough to change it.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you don't have to do anything. You just have to you just have to own it.
Yes.
Yeah, I tend to get impatient with people. And you just own it. And so, because most people do the opposite. No, I don't. Parents will, Mommy, how come you're angry? I'm not angry. It's like we're so used to people like denying their own inner reality. And the way what Ram Dass said, he said, you can't leave a place that you haven't been.
Yes. Oh my God, it's so true. And I think I used to love, one he said one time is, if you're already in Boston, you don't have to take a bus to get there.
Not taking bus to go to Boston.
And I loved one of his talks about he was presenting one day, and he was in the heartfelt height of his greatness and presenting, and all of a sudden these two guys started giggling, 4 rows back, and they just broke into a snicker or laughter. And And he said, oh, these guys are going to be so worried that I'm going to yell at them at the end and say, why were you, snickering during my class? And, in that self-forgetting, he went back to them and at the end and said, yes, I know life is a cosmic giggle. Isn't it? That's great. You found here, you got almost, they got permission to let go and things. And I want to ask you too, because we're talking a lot about becoming really effective within ourselves. And Richard and I believe so much in transforming and winning the inner journey. And then you can give to others. The work we're doing, we hope to create a moment of connection and spirituality of sorts with people that they actually experience what we're doing in the interviews and giving their the classes if they move to that point. But I was going to say, talk about source, if you would. Energies greater than what we have in our intellect, whether we find them within or they come in the group setting. Do you believe there's something greater that can come into us and that we can call on and access?
I do. I try not to give it a name because
Yes.
Everybody's got their own. It's not God. It's Jesus. It's not Jesus. It's the Buddha. I don't care what you call it, but there's some. There's something beyond our own thinking minds, our own way of framing and looking at the world. Because there are infinite ways of looking at things, and when you can start elevating your consciousness to where you're coming from a place of love and wisdom, then magic can happen, right? You were talking about magic before, Richard, and this whole, it is magic because our lives start to take on a more magical quality when we're living from source. So there's no question about it. And so if we could help touch people with that, and there's no way to describe it either, right? There's no way to describe what's the difference between my day-to-day life and my life when it's inspired by something greater than myself. It's, whether through prayer or meditation or contemplation, there's a qualitative difference that you have to experience.
Absolutely.
Right? You can't just give it a name because that's reductive. It's like if I give it a name, like what is it like to live in that space, then I could just dismiss it because it's just a thing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Oh God, absolutely.
The philosopher Kierkegaard said that if you name me, you negate me.
There you go. It just reduces it to because then it's just one more thing to throw out with the trash,
Yeah.
But I remember.
May I chime in here?
Yeah,
May
please.
I chime in here? Evan, is that okay?
Oh, by all means, Richard. Yes.
I have purposely, during this interview, sat back and I'm speechless. And I mean that more than metaphorically, because I feel like Evan and I and our audience are being showered with nuggets and diamonds of wisdom like I have never experienced through this interview process. And we've been selectively choosing the greatest leaders we can find. And I knew instinctively when I talked to you, Steve, that you had a quality about you that differentiates you from so many successful people in leadership abilities. And as I watch you, I'm thinking, what is that? And I can see that you have such a command of the English language and a mind that is so clear and so elegant in the way it processes information that it comes out of you in such a beautiful way, steeped in wisdom. And
I'll tell you my secret, right?
It's been a blessing just to receive from you. And I thank you. I thank you for you have given us and our audience a tremendous gift, Steve.
Absolute pleasure to me. A lot of this kind of material doesn't live until it's spoken.
Yes.
So I always, welcome the opportunity to speak it. And I think I mentioned this to you before, is like my secret is I just don't think before I open my mouth. I just start talking. It's like, it's counterintuitive because I operate based on what, the Buddhists call faith mind. Faith mind is just, I've got faith from having practiced this for 30 years that this wisdom lives inside of me and that it's going to present itself in the appropriate way to the appropriate people at the appropriate time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And we've wanted to be in flow and authenticity in this where, people could get connected to you and to us. And I was going to say too, what do you do for special interests when you're not your practice and a part of it could probably be your practice, right? Of meditation and renewal. But how else do you enjoy your life outside of business?
I tend to be relatively I like solitude. I mean, I have a lot of friends and people I like to see from time to time. I'm like, my 65th birthday is coming up in 2 weeks, and I haven't planned anything for it. And if nobody else does, there won't be anything, because I just don't. I'm not a party planner and a maker of events, but something might come together despite myself, which is great. And I like being around fun people that have really interesting conversations, and I like to laugh and, have a glass of wine with a nice meal. And I live in a stunning place. I'm right on Lake Champlain in Burlington, Vermont. So I love being on the waterfront and walking along, taking great walks. And unfortunately, my beloved dog Woody passed away 6 months ago. And it's been the first 3 of the 6 months was by any account the hardest time of my life. It was the most painful, emptiest feeling I've ever felt in my life, and I'm just sort of climbing out of that. And I'm going to get a new dog in a couple of weeks. So I'm a big dog person. I love Woody. Was not just like a pet, but he went with me everywhere I went. We traveled the world together, and that's what I'm used to. I'm used to having a companion with me wherever I go, and I love walking in the woods, so that's, I get replenished by nature. So I don't tend to go out for like hikes where I spend the night out in the woods, but I love day hikes. So I do a lot of day hiking. And then all the other things I love to do, I couldn't do this past year because it was COVID. So I couldn't go out to eat. I couldn't go to the movies. I couldn't do those things. Love to play Frisbee also.
That is great. Wow. So wonderful and interesting. And I'm so sorry about Woody. I feel that I had a dog, Bear, Cavalier King Charles, that I lost. He was so sweet. And now I have a new dog, Ollie, and I love him dearly. And he snuggles me. He actually, like a human, and so he is one of my humans, and he's so beautiful. So, and I was going to ask too, because sometimes animals have given me so much love, and I give them. I go to the beach to patch people's dogs, and I can tell they're ready to go, and I'm like, sorry, I'm not done. I'm still in my love.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And it's so important for them and for me. And I was going to say, in your life, if I could ask too, what is either the moment that a human being with the most love touched you in a moment, or a moment that just touched you so beautifully, whether in a seminar or someone even unexpected in witnessing them or their vulnerability, like anything that comes to mind?
My grandma Flo was that person to me who really filled my soul and made, and filled my heart. And I had a couple of sort of paranormal experiences after she died where I felt like she was there, and that was very beautiful and touching. I love moments. I can't think of a whole lot of them right now, but moments when I'm suddenly proven wrong about something, and that what I'm proven wrong about is that there's greatness in people that I didn't recognize, and then suddenly it's there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a story about that, and it's sort of an embarrassing story in a way, but it's kind of interesting. It's like I was flipping through a multi-page brochure for, I think it was maybe Mind Valley or one of those kind of mindfulness seminars. It was a multi-day conference, and one of their keynote speakers, as I flipped the pages, was Monica Lewinsky. And I sort of was like, I wonder what that's going to be about. I had like this sort of snickery snide kind of response in my mind, and then I looked, and the title of her talk was Living Through Shame.
Oh my God, yes.
And I felt like this amazing sense of, like, first of all, my own kind of small-mindedness is the way I reacted initially, but it was also this great welling up of wow, it's like, this is a person, like, I just had all this respect for her where before she was just a caricature of herself. Yeah. And just seeing that, it was like, I get chills right now thinking about it. It was just like this amazing feeling of, here's somebody who's had to really fight her way through a very difficult, publicly embarrassing, humiliating experience, and come out the other side with enough wisdom to be able to, share it and help others. And that was a chilling thing for me.
Wow, that is amazing. That blows me away, the walking through shame and what she must have endured and to come to the other side. Oh, that's such an example of the things that we believe so much in. And I believe also to seeing the goodness of people or greatness and realizing that it exists, right? Because I feel like with what we do and who we are and with our commitment in these matters of things, that we carry the good forward, right? And I really admire what you do and who you are and everything that you're causing. And it's interesting as we've done this, my mind also, it stayed right in here with us, but also I say, geez, there's things he could teach on. And, the people need it because, Steve, often, with who you become and the energy you have, as well as the practices you've developed for people, there are people, I believe, in the other side of the world somewhere that might not even get access to be able to come to one of your seminars or to come to your house and do a one-on-one counseling session, but they need what we have. They might have internet, they might even have it on a phone. And I think in some ways, part of what we're doing and opening up is saving lives and helping people. And your vulnerability really touches me, and I believe everybody that's going to listen to this, because the heart, is behind it all. And I really commend you for this work. I'm so excited. And I was going to ask too, is there anything that you want to share with the audience about what you do or the aspirations that you have, what you want to create or cause in the next year or two for yourself?
Well, yeah, it's again, as I mentioned, having lost Woody and everything, has been kind of a pivotal time, and not really 100% clear about what I'm putting most of my energy into. But I do find myself drawn to doing more healing work, bringing some of these principles and techniques and tools of mindfulness in to help people overcome chronic pain or anxiety, those things that are pretty rudimentary and get people stuck. And I then love helping people, because once you remove those obstacles, it's like the plant that's got a rock on it. You take the rock off, and the plant just explodes into bloom. And I think that's true of a lot of us. We're just being held back by some mismanaged thought or some uninspected piece of old baggage. And what I do is to hold the space for people to be able to explore themselves. And, I'm a safe space. I mean, I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you think. It's just, you're just having the human condition like everybody else. Like Ram Dass said, everybody's got stuff. And, it's whatever your stuff is. If I have the privilege of working with you, that means that we'll, in a safe space, explore what that stuff is, and how your brain is manufacturing some of your suffering, and how you can use tools and techniques and processes to overcome it. So that's what I'm interested in right now is, even as something as simple as being a meditation guide for somebody, and not have to spend an arm and a leg. Maybe you're paying $10 a week or something in order to, get a little bit of guidance so that the work you're doing isn't going to waste. Because a lot of this work, if you're not doing it right, you could there was a great metaphor that Goenka used where he was talking about a couple of stoners, like, going out in the middle of the night onto the river, and they're going to paddle this boat all night, and they're paddling the boat, like smoking and they're paddling, and in the morning when the sun comes up, they realize they haven't budged. They're in the exact same spot because the boat was still tied to the dock. They forgot to untie it. And that's what a lot of people do. They're working, God bless them, they're trying really hard to get some movement, and they're not getting any movement because they're still tied to the dock. And I'm pretty good at helping to snip that line.
Yes. Oh my God.
Evan and I are smiling when you said you create the space for people, because our intent behind this video series is to have people create the space for people to come in and step into their greatness. And I can honestly say you've done that miraculously, beautifully.
Thanks. Well, you guys are amazing. I mean, this has been, one of my favorite interviews in a good long time. It's just, it's clear. And that's another point I think, we can make to the audience as well, is it is clear to anybody who's paying attention who's really walking the walk and who's not.
Yeah.
So don't waste all your time learning how to do something. Spend some of your time learning how to be something. Be that person. Because it's, that's the real gift anyway.
And for someone that wants to learn more, Steve has a wonderful website. It's a very engaging website. It's filled with videos and blogs and a lot of free information. In addition to be engaging, you can take an assessment as for yourself as to how mindful you are living your life. So it's great fun for anybody that would want to learn more about what Steve's work is all about.
Yeah, and that's a great place to start. You know, another thing you may do just to kind of get your toes in the water about some of my writing is if you go to bestofsteve.com, just Best of Steve. There's you put your name and email address in, and you'll get a free digital download of the first chapter of Bulletproof, which is my latest book.
Oh my God, I am so excited about that.
So that's a good place to start. And then if you like it, I think there's a link at the bottom that takes you to the Amazon page where you can purchase the book.
I'll be purchasing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And by all means, if you have any inclination or interest or curiosity about what it would be like to work with me at any level, whether it's group coaching or individual coaching, or find out about upcoming classes, just fire me off an email or send me a note through the contact form on my website, which is stevetaubman.com. And I always answer my emails. I'm one of these crazy people who, like right now, in this moment, I've got 8 emails in my inbox, and it's driving me crazy that there are that many.
Wow, that's incredible.
I answer people promptly. I clear out the clutter quickly. I feel like, if you develop some of these kinds of habits, live clutter-free. Have some order, have some discipline, have some, that you could be counted upon. I had a guy that I just, I decided not to work with. This was a young guy, and I felt bad about it. This guy is probably in his 20s, and he's selling insurance for Bankers Trust. And he contacted me. He cold called me because I'm about to turn 65, and I'm about to be a Medicare recipient for the first time. And so that means getting Medicare, and either getting a managed care plan or getting classic Medicare, and then getting a Medigap, which is a supplemental plan. So he was calling to help to sell me a supplemental plan.
Yes.
Nice guy, really nice guy. But he blew me off twice.
Oh God.
After, he didn't show up for a meeting, and then he didn't show up for another meeting. And so I called the company and I said, I'm not ready to give up on you as a company, but I'm not working with this guy. So can you send me somebody else to work with? So now the first guy lost the business.
Yes.
And I wrote him an email and I said, hey, listen, I wanted to say this. Usually I wouldn't bother, but you're a really nice guy. And sometimes nice guys don't get the feedback that they need to change and grow.
Yeah.
And I just think, you need to hear this, that, the way that you handled the situation essentially burned a bridge, but I'm not, I've got nothing against you as a person. I just want to encourage you to, clean up your act, do this differently, because otherwise it's going to be an obstacle. And that's one of the obstacles we talked about before, is what are the obstacles you're likely to encounter in your movement toward success? And if it's unreliability, get reliable. Learn what reliability looks like. It's great when, you return calls when you say you're going to return them, and you get off the call at the time you say you're going to get off the call, and you just do things with a certain amount of precision. It's impeccability, and I've known about impeccability since I read the teachings of Don Juan and all those Carlos Castaneda books back in the 70s. Living an impeccable life. Don't leave a lot of clutter, don't leave a lot of baggage in your path. And it pays off.
Oh my God, these are such important captures too. Living as commitment, as integrity, as pure intention, in knowing what that is and standing as it also changes the energy. I found that when I'm doing the work well and I'm doing the right thing, and if I just keep doing the right thing over and over again, the right things happen, but the energy improves, my consciousness improves along with meditation. And I was going to say too, and Richard will probably concur with me on this, I was thinking you're maybe 48, and so whatever you're doing, 65, you look incredible.
I agree.
I'm only wrinkly from here down.
That's okay. You gotta, that's another example for the audience too, about we live well and we get the source within us and we're managing ourselves, we can stay vibrant for a very long time. I know Richard could beat me up the mountain here if we were going to hike, in the thriving. And I also want to say, Richard said something to me a few weeks ago that almost resonates with what we've shared in our time with you, is that it's not about what we get when we meet the goal and get to the end. It's really about who we become in the journey, and people being willing to take the journey and go deep and do the work is so key. And I've had people as well that I've even tried to coach that were like, rah, 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 but they wonderful people, but they couldn't live as their commitment. They couldn't take the steps. And so I think one of the themes too of interviewing Steve today is taking action, living as your commitment, stepping up and exploring with him. I think he's inviting you too to say, hey, if you're thinking about this, if you're about this, let's have a conversation. Let's move forward and look into it. So my goal is if I can get your gifts and what you're doing taken all over the world with what we're doing, then then we'll really have done our work. So I hope I get to meet Steve at one point too.
Yeah.
Outside of my family, I'm pretty, I love my solace and my serenity too, but I could just tell we clicked and connected on so much. We're going to be doing wonderful things here, and you really help bring our vision and the heartfulness behind everything. And thank you. Thank you for living it, because a lot of people don't.
Yes.
Back at you. Back at you.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Yes. Virtual.
Okay.
I'm sending you the energy, my friend. Thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody for listening to.
Okay.
Okay.
We will see you very soon. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.